She didn't think that much would show in her first nude scene in the 1970s film Joe, but she was wrong. During filming, she believed they would only capture minimal shots that wouldn't reveal too much. However, the director chose to shoot more candid and unfiltered scenes to authentically portray the raw emotion of the character. When the scene was edited, she realized how exposed she truly was on screen. This moment became a turning point in her career, challenging her comfort and pushing her into new territory. Back then, films like Joe aimed to confront social issues head-on, and her nude scene was part of that honest storytelling. It shocked some viewers and critics alike, sparking conversations about nudity and realism in cinema. She faced the scene with determination, knowing it was important for the film's message. Her experience reflected wider changes in the industry, where actors began to accept more natural portrayals of human vulnerability. Despite initial fears, the scene helped her find recognition and respect as an actress willing to take risks. Over time, it became an iconic moment that signified a shift toward more open and truthful filmmaking. Because the story of Joe focuses on the lives of two very different men, it draws a strong picture of how people can be affected by the world around them. Joe Curran, played by Peter Boyle, is a man who works in a factory and has served in World War II. He lives in the working-class neighborhood of Asteria in Queens. Joe is a bitter man who often speaks his mind, especially when it comes to his dislike for the changes happening in society. He feels resentful about liberals, racial minorities, the LGBTQ community, and the new counterculture movement. His mindset is shaped by his tough life, economic struggles, and loyalty to old-fashioned values. On the other hand, Bill Compton, portrayed by Dennis Patrick, is very different. He is an affluent advertising executive living in a modern, upscale apartment on Park Avenue. Bill is reserved, wealthy, and lives a comfortable life that seems untouched by the social upheaval affecting many others. Despite their differences in money and lifestyle, both men are uneasy about how society is changing. The film shows how feelings of anger, fear, and disillusionment are not limited to one class or social group. Instead, these emotions bring Joe and Bill onto a path where their worlds collide, revealing how personal frustrations can lead to conflict across different backgrounds. The film uses their contrasting lives to explore the broader cultural anxieties of the time, making it clear that beneath appearances, many share similar fears about losing control and the familiar ways of life they hold dear. As their stories unfold, the audience sees how these two men, despite their differences, are connected by their inner turmoil and the shifting society around them. The turning point of the film unfolds when Bill Compton's controlled existence is shattered by a shocking act of violence. After discovering that his daughter Melissa is romantically involved with Frank Russo, a sleazy drug dealer deeply entrenched in the counterculture lifestyle Bill detests, a confrontation leads to tragedy. Bill, driven by rage, fear, and a sense of helplessness, brutally murders Frank in Melissa's apartment. The act, seemingly spontaneous, is fueled by a cocktail of paternal desperation and social contempt. Staggered by guilt and panic, Bill seeks refuge in a bar where he tries to unburden himself, drunkenly confessing the crime to a group of strangers, one of whom is Joe Curran. To Bill, it is a moment of weakness. To Joe, it is a moment of glory. Joe, who frequently fantasizes about punishing those he views as societal degenerates, sees Bill's action as heroic. Rather than turning him in, Joe becomes fixated on Bill, idolizing him as a man who did what Joe only talks about doing. This chance meeting triggers a twisted camaraderie rooted not in friendship, but in mutual dissatisfaction, class-based resentment, and a shared hostility toward a world they no longer recognize. As Joe and Bill continue to interact, their relationship evolves from a mere chance encounter into a complicated, often dangerous, alliance. Initially, Bill is terrified that Joe will report him to the authorities for his involvement in a murder. However, he is both relieved and disturbed when he realizes that Joe does not view him as a criminal, but rather admires him for his actions. Joe, who reveres Bill for taking a stand against what he perceives as the moral decay of modern society, sees him as a symbol of strength and righteousness. This admiration becomes the foundation of their bond, with Joe viewing Bill not just as a friend, but as a partner in a shared cause, one that is fueled by their shared disgust at the current state of the world. Their friendship transcends typical social and economic divisions. Bill, a man used to the structure of his career and family life, finds himself drawn into Joe's chaotic worldview. The two bond over booze-fueled conversations, rants about the corruption of society, and a mutual desire to restore a sense of order that they feel has been lost. Joe's philosophy, a radical and impulsive one, begins to seduce Bill, slowly eroding the boundaries he once valued. Joe, in his rough and unpredictable way, pulls Bill further into his volatile vision of masculinity and power, offering a strange form of liberation that becomes increasingly hard for Bill to resist. However, not everyone shares their enthusiasm for this peculiar partnership. Bill's wife, Joan, is quick to notice the growing influence Joe has over her husband. Joan, an observant and rational woman, sees through Joe's crude exterior and understands the dangerous path he is leading Bill down. She is concerned about Joe's radical ideas and his impulsive tendencies, fearing that they could push Bill to the edge, threatening not only his career but also his family life. Joan's concerns grow as she watches Bill's transformation from a man in control to one willing to embrace Joe's simplistic and destructive worldview. She fears that if Bill continues down this path, he will lose more than just his career. He will lose himself. The tension between Bill's desire for freedom and his commitment to his family builds as Joe's influence grows. Bill finds himself torn between two worlds: the familiar, structured life he once knew, and the chaotic, primal allure of Joe's way of thinking. As his relationship with Joe deepens, Bill begins to lose control over the boundaries he once held dear. The growing danger of their alliance becomes more apparent, but Bill is increasingly unable or unwilling to break free from Joe's grasp. The evolving dynamic between the two men creates a brewing storm that could tear apart everything Bill has worked for, from his career to his marriage. Although the producers initially wanted someone older and more physically imposing for the role of Joe Curran, they found their ideal actor in Peter Boyle, whose casting turned out to be a pivotal moment for the film. Lawrence Tierney, known for tough guy roles in the 1940s and 1950s, was first considered because his rugged appearance and age seemed perfect to show Joe's world weariness and disillusionment after World War II. However, director John G. Avildsen saw qualities in Boyle that others missed. Boyle was only 34 and not widely known at that time. During his audition, instead of following the script word for word, Boyle performed an intense, spontaneous monologue. This raw delivery revealed the core of Joe's character, a man full of frustration, resentment, and hidden rage, masked only slightly by a working-class bravado. Avildsen was immediately struck by Boyle's fierce and unpredictable energy. He insisted on casting Boyle, even though the studio had reservations about this unconventional choice. Boyle's performance brought a level of truth, complexity, and unsettling realism to the character that resonated deeply with audiences and critics alike. His portrayal was not just acting, he truly embodied Joe, capturing the dangerous side of populist anger and frustration that made the film an instant classic. Boyle's bold approach elevated the movie's impact and solidified his reputation as one of the most fearless actors of his era. After the release of the 1970 film Joe, Peter Boyle was widely recognized for his powerful performance as the character Joe. However, despite the film's success and Boyle's rising fame, he was deeply unsettled by how audiences reacted to the film's violent scenes. Instead of feeling shock or discomfort, many viewers responded with applause and cheers, which disturbed Boyle because he had intended the film to serve as a cautionary tale about the darker side of human nature. Boyle wanted Joe to be a reflection of fears, ignorance, and hatred that can take over a person's mind, making the audience think about the dangers of such feelings. Unfortunately, many people saw Joe as an anti-hero rather than a warning. They admired his brutal honesty and his violent ways, which made Boyle feel uneasy. This reaction caused Boyle to question the ethics of his work and the messages it might send. As a result, he made a personal decision not to take part in films or TV shows that glorified or exploited violence for entertainment. His dedication to this belief was tested soon after when he was offered the lead role in The French Connection, a film about crime that later won several awards, including Best Picture and Best Actor for Gene Hackman. Boyle refused the role because he did not want to be part of a project that might promote or normalize violence in movies. Ironically, over time, Boyle appeared in other violent or action movies, which suggested that his initial stance either softened or became harder to maintain because of the financial needs and competition in the film industry. Still, his inner conflict remains a powerful example of how an actor can struggle with the influence of their performances and the moral responsibilities that come with portraying intense or violent characters. Certainly, in the 1980s, as society changed and people became more interested in revisiting classic characters, there were serious plans to make a sequel to the 1970 movie Joe called Citizen Joe. This new film was supposed to focus on Joe Curran's life after he finished his prison sentence for the violent acts he committed at the end of the original movie. The story would show Joe as he tried to adjust to a world that had become more modern and politically correct, a world very different from the one he knew. The movie would highlight his struggles to reconnect with his family, especially with his children who had grown older and developed more liberal views. These children would challenge Joe's old-fashioned beliefs and show how much he was out of touch. Cannon Films, a studio well known for making low-budget action movies and using bold advertising, heavily promoted the project. They released teaser posters with a slogan saying, "The times have changed, but the man has not. He's back." This created excitement and curiosity among the audience. However, despite the strong marketing, the film was never made. Several reasons were given, including disagreements over the story, financial problems, and the changing political climate of the time. As society grew more sensitive about themes of anger and violence, the character of Joe became more controversial and difficult to present in a positive light. The idea of making the sequel remains a fascinating what-if in film history because it could have offered a story about redemption, the differences between generations, and the lasting effects of cultural conflicts. After the film Joe was completed and ready for release, a tragic event in Detroit cast an eerie shadow over its debut. Just weeks before the movie hit theaters, Arville Douglas Garland committed a horrifying act of violence by killing his daughter, her boyfriend, and 2 other students inside a university dormitory. The crime shared striking similarities with the movie's story, especially the climactic scene where the protagonist and his companion carry out a violent act of mass destruction under the pretense of seeking justice. This resemblance caused great concern among those involved in the legal process. The judge overseeing Garland's case took unusual precautions to prevent the film from influencing the jury. During jury selection, court officials made it clear that anyone who had seen Joe would be disqualified, fearing the movie's message might sway opinions about Garland's mental state or motives. The incident sparked major ethical debates about the power of movies to impact people's minds and actions. Some wondered whether films simply reflect society's darker side, or if they can somehow influence real-life violence. Although no proof was found that Joe directly caused Garland's crime, the timing and similarities between the film and the tragedy made many people think about the unsettling connection. This event showed how the themes in Joe seemed to echo the troubled times of that period and highlighted the disturbing questions about movies and their role in society. Certainly, Norman Wexler, the screenwriter behind the 1970 movie Joe, was known for his brilliant talent and his highly unstable personality. As the creative mind who crafted a script that sharply examined the unrest in American society, Wexler brought a deep understanding of social turmoil to his work. Yet, despite his talent, he often struggled with his mental health. Production staff like Jim Sachs observed that Wexler's mood and behavior changed greatly depending on whether he was taking his prescribed medication. When he was on his medication, Wexler was clear-headed, articulate, and able to focus on his storytelling. He could communicate his ideas well and was generally cooperative. However, whenever he was off his medication, his behavior became unpredictable and disruptive. There are stories of him doing things that shocked everyone involved. For example, he once urinated in a public fountain, which caused discomfort among people nearby. On another occasion, he created chaos on the streets of Washington, D.C., by throwing confusing amounts of money into the air, startling pedestrians, and sparking a spontaneous riot. These extreme episodes contributed to the legend of Wexler as a man caught between genius and madness. His unpredictable actions made him a figure of both fascination and concern for those working with him. His erratic behavior added a sense of chaos to the film's production, mirroring the intense emotional instability and societal disorder that the movie was about. Wexler's personal struggles seemed to bleed into his work, making him a complex presence on set and leaving a lasting impression on everyone involved. His life and work became intertwined in the story of Joe, reflecting the turbulence and turmoil of the era. After carefully observing Peter Boyle's portrayal of Joe in the 1970 movie, it becomes clear that his commitment extended far beyond just delivering lines. Boyle's improvisational skills played a vital role in creating some of the film's most unforgettable and unsettling moments. One of the most challenging scenes for him was the nude love scene with the young hippie woman, played by Patty D'Arbanville. This scene took place in a small, unadorned setting, and both actors had to be emotionally and physically open in a way that made them feel exposed. Boyle, in particular, felt self-conscious about his body and the intimacy the scene required, which made the moment even more nerve-wracking. Nonetheless, Boyle chose to embrace his discomfort, combining humor with spontaneity to navigate the awkwardness. During a take, unexpectedly, and without prior scripting, Boyle put his co-star's breast in his mouth, causing her to react with a surprise shout, "Hey, wait a minute!" Without losing his composure, Boyle softly said, "I hope I'm not out of line," capturing Joe's awkward desperation perfectly. The director, John G. Avildsen, decided to keep this unplanned line in the final version because it added a layer of realism and raw emotion to the scene. This spontaneous moment highlights Boyle's fearless approach to acting, where improvisation helps to blur the lines between performance and genuine feeling. His willingness to perform raw, authentic moments contributed significantly to the film's impact, showing a deep dedication to portraying Joe's troubled yet vulnerable soul. After watching the 1970 film Joe, many people recognize it as the movie that marked Susan Sarandon's first major appearance in the world of professional cinema. Before this role, she had only acted in an unfinished and unreleased film called The Next Oasis in 1968. When she was cast in Joe, her role as Melissa, the troubled daughter of Bill Compton, brought her into the spotlight and introduced audiences to a young actress with a talent for emotional depth and daring choices. Her character was someone caught between rebellion and self-destruction, which allowed Sarandon to show a haunting vulnerability that quickly gained attention. Part of her agreement to star in Joe involved filming a nude scene. She believed that her long hair and clever camera angles would hide her body, and she was told that her nudity would be mostly concealed by objects and her positioning. However, when she saw the final version of the film, she was surprised to notice that her nudity was more visible than she expected. This experience taught her an early lesson about how artistic choices and the reality of filming can sometimes differ. Despite her initial discomfort, Sarandon's courage to take on bold and sometimes controversial roles would continue to shape her career. She became known for challenging societal norms around women, sexuality, and aging in Hollywood. Her work in Joe was just the beginning of a journey that would eventually lead her to win an Academy Award and become one of the most fearless and respected actresses in the film industry. Over the years, she built a reputation for her willingness to explore complex characters and push boundaries, always staying true to her artistic vision. Her debut in Joe remains a significant chapter in her career, setting the stage for the bold performances that followed, and defining her as a talented actress unafraid to confront difficult subjects. This film, and her experience with it, are still remembered as an important part of her rise to fame. While she initially thought that her first nude scene in the 1970s film Joe would be minimal and easily manageable, she soon realized how much actually showed on screen. The director's decision to film more candid and unfiltered moments meant that the scene revealed more than she had expected, exposing her vulnerability and challenging her comfort zone. This experience marked a significant turning point in her acting career, pushing her to confront her fears and accept the raw honesty that cinema was starting to embrace during that time. The film aimed to address social issues with a level of realism that was uncommon then, and her willingness to participate in such a scene made a statement about the evolving standards in movies. Although some viewers and critics were shocked by the openness displayed, her courage helped open discussions about nudity, authenticity, and human vulnerability in films. Over time, the scene became an iconic example of the industry's move toward more honest storytelling, ultimately earning her recognition and respect for her bravery. It was a moment that reflected the broader cultural shifts happening in the film industry, encouraging actors to accept more natural and expressive portrayals. Her experience highlighted that pushing boundaries could lead to greater artistic freedom and societal impact, transforming her career and influencing future cinematic